Getting ready for 6th grade lesson 9, essential question. How can you determine if two ratios are equivalent? Unlock the problem. To make brass, you can mix 2 parts zinc to 3 parts copper, a ratio of 2 to 3. If you have 12 bars of copper and use them all, how many bars of zinc do you need to make brass? Underline what you're being asked to find and circle the important information. You should have squiggle underlined how many bars of zinc do you need to make brass, and circled 2 parts zinc to 3 parts copper and 12 bars of copper. You could have also underlined the word ratio so that you knew we were working with ratios. Since ratios can be written as fractions, 2 to 3 can be written as 2 over 3, 2 to 3, 2/3. Use what you know about equivalent fractions to find equivalent ratios. Remember that ratios are comparisons of two different numbers and that equivalent means equal. Now to actually solve the problem. We are going to use a diagram to find an equivalent ratio. A diagram is a picture. Step 1, draw bars to represent 2 to 3 ratio of zinc to copper. And they did that, so it was 2 parts zinc, so they have 2 bars here labeled as zinc, and 3 parts copper. So they have 3 bars here labeled copper. You could have also done something simple as so there's 2 Z's with 3 C's. Doesn't always have to be a rectangle or a circle. Just something so that you know what you're talking about or what you're representing. Step 2 is to add groups until you have 12 bars of copper. So you can see right here that this was one group, there's a second group, and a third group, and then a fourth group. And they stopped because you ended up with, there's 3, 6, 9, 12 groups of copper, which that's what they told you how many bars of copper you had to work with. So now that you have your picture, step 3 is to actually count the zinc bars and write the equivalent ratio. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8 bars of zinc, and so 2 to 3 is equivalent to the ratio of 8 to 12. And we can say that because we drew this out in groups of 2 to 3, and we kept the ratio the same with each group. Now, I hope this looks familiar, so let's kind of look through this another way without the diagram. Since we're able to write ratios as a fraction, we can say zinc is 2 to 3, and they want an equivalent ratio. Do we know how to find equivalent fractions? We do. And so all we need to remember is that the top part is zinc, the bottom part is copper, and so how many bars of copper did we have to use? We had 12 bars of copper to use, and so if we wanted to make an equivalent fraction so that the copper was 12, so that means right here our denominator was 12, what are we doing to our 3 to make it 12? We're multiplying it by 4. So whatever we do to the denominator of a fraction, we have to do to the numerator. So let's multiply that by 4. And so zinc, we have 2 times 4. What is our numerator now? It is 8. And it matches our picture, right? We have 8 bars of zinc right here, and we have 12 bars of copper. So is our fraction equivalent? Well, that's what we came up with. And so we could even just rewrite it as 8 to 12. So now that we have the connection with the skill that we already know, let's look at our try this. So our try this says use equivalent ratios to find out if 6 to 8 is equivalent to 18 to 24. So step 1 is to write the ratios as fractions. Okay, so we have 6 to 8 written as 6 over 8, and 18 to 24 written as 18 over 24. And then step 2 is to write the fractions in simplest form, then compare. So step 2 has kind of 2 steps. First, you need to reduce them both all the way down, so simplify them. 6 and 8, they're both divisible by 2, and so it simplifies to 3/4. 18 and 24 are both divisible by 6, and so it reduces down to 3/4. And so are they equivalent? Are they the same? Yes, they both reduce down to 3/4, and so they are equivalent. So you should be able to do two different things. You should be able to give me a equivalent ratio, which is what we did in the unlock the problem part, and then B, you should be able to tell me if two ratios are equivalent, because all you do is write them as fractions and simplify them both down all the way and then compare. If 6/8 and 18/24 did not reduce down to the same fraction, they would not be equivalent ratios. For the share and show, you have 1 through A working with these ratios, and then you have numbers 2 and 3. Press pause while you work through them, and then press play when you're ready to check your answers. Number 1A, using are the ratios 3 to 5 and 12 to 20 equivalent? Number 1A gives you the first step. Write both ratios as fractions. So you should have it written as 3/5, 3 over 5, and 12/20, 12 over 20. B are both ratios in simplest form. 3/5 cannot reduce, but 12/20, they're both even, so they both could reduce. So the answer to B is actually no, because we need to reduce 12/20. So step 1C is the next step, where it tells you to write both ratios in the simplest form. So 3/5 stays the same, but what can 12/20 reduce to? Well, I could do 2. They both are divisible by 2. 12 is divisible by 3, but 20 is not. 12 is divisible by 4, and 20 is divisible by 4. So I'm actually going to work with dividing by 4. Okay? So I'm just going to make a mark right there. Dividing by 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then we can answer 1D. Are the ratios equivalent? Are these the same? They are the same, and so our answer is yes. For number 2 and 3, you have to go through the same steps. They just don't break it down as much for you. So number 2, they both reduce down to 1/3, and that means that number 2 is equivalent. And on number 3, 3/7, 12/21 reduces, and 12/21 reduces to 4/7. So 3/7 and 4/7 are not equal, and therefore number 3 is not equivalent. For the on your own, the first set, they're asking you to find the equivalent ratio. Remember, ratios can be written as fractions, and so you're essentially trying to find an essential fraction, but you're writing it as a ratio. And then on 10, 11, 12, you're writing equivalent or not equivalent. You're not writing yes or no, you're writing equivalent or not equivalent, and then you're problem solving. So press pause while you work on the on your own section and problem solving. For number 4, they wanted you to write an equivalent ratio, and they give you the second term blank to 4. So 5 to 2 equals blank to 4. So what did they do to the 2 to get the 4? Well, they multiplied it times 2. So that means I need to multiply my 5 times 2, which gives me the ratio of 10 to 4. Number 5 is a little trickier because you can see right away that you're trying to get from a 3 to a 7. So the best way to solve this one is to actually reduce the 3 to 6 to its simplest form and then find the equivalent. So let's reduce 3 to 6, because if we that'd be the same thing as 1 to 2, 1/2, right? 3 is 1/2 of 6. So if it is 1 to 2, so 3 to 6, 7, if we wanted it to be equivalent, it would have to be the same as 1, reducing down to 1 to 2. The second step of that would need to be 14, and that would keep it equivalent so that it reduces down to 1 to 2. 7 is another one where it's easier to reduce down first and then find an equivalent. So keeping the 2 to 3 ratio, it would need to be 10 to 15. "11 is not equivalent because 36/24 reduces all the way down to 3 over 2, and it needed to be equivalent to 4 to 3. For number 13, you should have underlined how many would you expect to be cheese, and circled 3 of every 5 pizzas, and that's the cheese, and she sold 80. So how many do you think were cheese? This is a ratio problem, and so 3 of every 5, so that means 3 of every 5 were cheese, and she sold 80 that day. And so the bottom number represents the total, and the top number represents cheese. So what did they do to the 5 to make it 80? If you don't know the multiplication fact off the top of your head, you can always divide to find that. So 80 divided by 5, we got 16, so multiply 5 times 16 to get 80, so multiply 3 times 16, and your top number is going to be 48. And so how many would you expect to be cheese? 48 pizzas.